mobile applications development. We've been apart for some time now. 1 week coming across with Sandy, and another week with 1 week with Halloween, another week with Veterans Day. So I decided that we'll do a quick review of what we saw in week 0. Week 0 was kind of introduction just to mobile application development, and we talked about web applications and that we're gonna do stuff doing HTML5 and JavaScript and such, and then we'll move on to Android, and we'll start looking on the Android environment. So I created these hand sheets that are like quick review of our first week, and I decided that we'll do it in an interactive base, like we can ask questions and stuff. So what we saw at the beginning, we just gave a quick introduction to our ACM. What was ACM? ACM was one of the biggest contributors of the computer science, and it stands for Association for Computing Machinery. And then we went on to define computer science, and we said, what is computer science? There were a lot of ways of defining computer science, but we said that one of the core things about computer science is we solve problems. And not that we just solve problems, we solve them more efficiently. And talking about solving problems more efficiently, we gave an example of mobile applications, and we said that mobile applications are actually another example of solving problems more efficiently, right? Because before we had books that we had businesses listed on, and we had books that contacts were listed on, but then we kind of went off from that environment, and we started inventing all these mobile phones and applications that hold all this data on the go, and we can reach whatever we want while we're traveling or doing anything. So it's kind of better approach to solving problems more efficiently. So when we talked about mobile applications, right, we gave 2 big categories, and we said that almost every mobile application that's on the market right now belongs to one of these 2 categories. What were those 2 categories? Can anyone identify?
Android and iOS.
Android and iOS. I'll come back to this, but that's a lower level of classification. On the very abstract level, on the very top level, there are only 2 categories.
Web and native.
Exactly, right? All the applications that are out there, they belong either to web applications or native applications. Now, what we said, Android and iPhone, iOS, they are native applications. They're example of native applications. And also there are web applications that are developed using techniques like HTML5 and JavaScript and such. And we identified a lot of differences between these two platforms, right? Web applications versus native applications. What are the advantages and disadvantages of using one or other? Can anyone list anything?
Native is always with information that you already have in the machinery or the system. You won't access other information through the internet or anything like that.
Okay.
It can be faster than that.
Native applications, they are installed on our devices. So if they don't require internet connection, they are limited within the space. They're limited within the space the machine gives us, right? It's either within the limits of operating system or memory or such. So we're limited with the data versus web applications. They rely on our server, and servers can hold a huge amount of data. So we have more access, I guess, with the data. But not really, because now native applications can access, can use internet connection, right? Depending on the type of native application, they can use internet connection and pick up data from servers, like Facebook has. Facebook application is installed on our phone, but it still uses internet connection to pull up data. So that's not very accurate, but on the abstract level, we can say that that's relevant. We said one of the biggest differences was that native applications, they are not cross-platform, and web applications were cross-platform. Because we write only one application using web application, and then we can access it on any device, whether it's iOS or Android or BlackBerry. Doesn't matter what type of application, we can always access it. Versus native applications, native applications are written on a specific language. If we're developing for Android, they're written on Java. If we're developing for iOS, they're written on Objective-C. BlackBerry uses different type of Java, different approach. So all these things are written separately, and then they're compiled to the object code and then installed on the device. So that's where the native apps comes. What is another difference? You can look at your sheet if you want. We have listed some of them there. Web applications require internet connection constantly, all the time. In order to access web application, we need an internet connection. Native application, depending on the type, it might and it might not. You know, if we have a camera that's a native application, we can pull our phone anytime and use it anywhere we want. It doesn't really require an internet connection. That's one other difference is updates. Web applications, updates can be transparent to the user, right? Updates can be implemented by the developers of the website, so and it can be accessed. Like if we go to the application, we'll realize that oh, it's been updated. We didn't do anything. But native applications, they require a manual update. The users of the phone, they manually have to go and update their applications themselves. So that's another difference. Basically, so then we give an example of frameworks. We said, you know, for web applications, there are several frameworks that are out there that lets us develop applications that are a little bit of a native application look-alike. You know, it gives us that look and feeling of a native application. We're going to see examples of those today. There's jQuery Mobile, there's Central Touch, and there's PhoneGap that's developed by Adobe. These third-party they let us develop an application, web application, and then using their own framework, they install our applications on the device. And what advantage does it give us? It gives us an advantage of accessing to the core of the machine a little bit, and also, if you realize, like, we cannot really sell web application, right? We know that Android has a marketplace where they sell applications, iOS has their own marketplace, and Windows Mobile has their own marketplace, and these are places where people can develop and sell applications. Web applications cannot be sold because they're not specific applications that lie somewhere. So using these frameworks, we can actually make our applications that are developed as a web application installable, and then they can be sold over those marketplaces. And at the third page of our review sheet, we have a HTML code that I would suggest if you get your hands on at home, just put that on a regular, create a regular file, HTML file, put that on there, and then see what comes out. Open it, and you can tweak things around. It has an example of JavaScript, simple JavaScript, that's an alert box. It has an example of CSS, which we thought, what was CSS? CSS was kind of cloning our website. We make an application, and then we make it pretty by the several techniques that are used by CSS. So, and that example code has all of that on there. So, starting today, let's see what we have here. Okay, we're going to look at one application. It's a class at Harvard University, CS76, that we are kind of using their data, and thanks to those guys at Harvard, we are using these slides. So this source code is available, and I put that on our website as well. You can access them by logging into our websites and going to the course page. So this is one application. It basically has two legs. It has a syllabus of lectures, and if we go to the lectures, we'll realize that it goes like week 1, week 2. So this is a web application, but doesn't really give us the feeling of a web, like phone application, right? So if we open that over here, that's no, this is not that. Let's make our browser. We don't have a simulator at the moment, so we're going to have to make our browser font size, so that kind of gives the idea. Alright, so this is that application. You know, if you imagine that as a phone screen, this is not really interesting, right? We don't have a phone-looking application. So what can we do to make it better? What are the techniques that we talked about that we can apply to make it more application look-alike? What can we apply? Any ideas? Like, how would we get the look, visibility, like just the, look, we talked about CSS, right? So if we apply CSS to this page, it will be a little bit better looking. So now it's just static page with some links, and if we click on lecture, it goes lecture 0, lecture 1, and if we click on lecture 0, it goes slides and video. So just basically travels in between pages, and it's not really interesting, right? So if you look at if we add just one thing, actually let's first look at the source code of this thing. So if you realize it catches the device width, this is the meta tag that we talked about last lecture. This is the meta tag that lets us catch the device width and then arrange our web application based on the device. So it does that, but it doesn't have any CSS file or JavaScript, anything associated with it, which is why that's just basic static page. Now what will happen if we put a CSS file to this thing? Let's look at that. Alright, now this is the CSS file added version of it, and this is much better, right? It's actually fun application looking like, and it kind of gives us the look of the native application at the beginning when we look at it at the first. It has a nice transparent a little bit header, and then the links that are lectures and syllabus. Click on the links. This is when we realize that it's not really, still doesn't give us the feeling of a native application, because when we click, it just changes all of a sudden. There's no transition, and if we use any iPhone or Android devices, we realize that when we click on the link, there's some kind of transitions that are happening, right? It kind of makes the applications interesting. This is very static. So basically, clicking on the link, it changes. So how can we achieve those features that are giving us all these functionalities? Let's look at it, source code, before we move on. Alright, now we can realize that, okay, it has a CSS file associated with it. This is the only difference that between the first page and the second page. Like first version and the second version. It has a CSS file. And this CSS file makes all that difference in the look. So if we can go and look inside the layer of inside the CSS file, what it is. So I would suggest to look all these features individually at home, get your hands on what do these things do. But it basically tells that, okay, give the body this font and don't give any margins. Header, H1 is the header tag that we have. So it gives us a little nice gradient background, and then it margins it, gives it some padding, and aligns text center. So basically, so this LIA is the links. We had 2 links on that thing. These are the properties of the links, and UL is unordered list, the whole thing. So just with the use of these things, our application already looks much better. Now let's look how can we achieve even better functionality with applying all those transitions. And that's where the frameworks come into play. With the use of frameworks, which on this example we use jQuery Mobile, we can achieve those transitions. And if you look at the thing, from the initial version, we don't see all those different. It's native application lookalike, right? It has again the nice gradient header, and then it has links that are a little bit gradient. It has no transition, indications on the right that these are links, and kind of will give us the idea that this will transition. So first, when we hover over, we can see that there's an effect that's happening. So this is also coming from that framework. And when we click on them, we can see that it kind of slides in an iPhone way. So like again, if we click on the other one, it will slide. Actually, let's resize this and make it a phone size. Okay, and if we go backwards, and they slide backwards. And this is not that different, right? All this thing is achieved only, if you look at the page source, by 2 lines of code. 2 lines of code, and we don't actually have to implement this as we did on the CSS. CSS we go and write ourselves. These 2 lines of codes are actually offered to us by jQuery, and there's 2 different ways of implementing that on our website. We can download the files and put it on our server, and then link to that version, or we can actually include the direct link which is lying down on a jQuery server. I would suggest to do this version. Why? Because jQuery guys are big guys. Their server are probably more trusted than our small server or something. So we have a better probability that this will always be running on the server. And also, if we are serving the internet all day long, right? We are going to different websites, and whether we know it or not, some website might already implement this thing on their header files. So if we have accessed that website with this, it will download the file and it will store it on our local storage. And then when we, again, try to access it on our version of the website, it will just take it from the local storage. It will not go to the link. So we'll get a better response time. So that is what the use of framework does. It gives us nice transitions and all these features. But again, we can realize that even though they're nice and neat, we can still see some flickerings on the screen. So again, they're not perfect. We're trying our best to achieve the native application look like. But there's still, depending on an internet connection, speed, and everything, we're gonna get some flickering screens and such. So we always have this trade-off. So when we make a decision whether we want to make a web application or a native application, these are all the things that we have to consider. Right? All right. So that is the end of that example. And these are some examples of the things that are given to us. We can include on the meta tags, and we can achieve a lot of functionalities with the use of web applications. This is one meta tag example. Kind of tells us that the device is capable of web application. And this is another actually nice, neat example. We can include this on the header file of our application. We can create an icon for our application. And that icon will live somewhere on our server, and we will link to that icon. So with the help of this, with this link, on iPhone, when we can pin the websites to our application list, right? We can create, there's a button in the middle, I think, that we can push, and it gives us like pin to the home screen. And when we pin it, it will create us a custom icon for our application. So it will kind of, again, generate some native application lookalike thing. So that's one feature that's out there. So, and these are the examples of frameworks that we saw. Just jQuery Touch, and then jQuery Mobile, Central Touch. All right. So this is basic HTML5 example. We went over like quick HTML5 last time, but I also included some HTML code on the handout, so you can get your hands on that at home. So if you look at the HTML5 layout overall, there's just like a little bit of a hierarchy, right? We have a document, and that document goes to the root element of HTML. So from the beginning of our code to the end of our code, we have HTML opening tag at the beginning, and then HTML closing tag at the end, and then we have all that stuff in between. So that between divides into two parts. We have a head, and then we have a body of our application. On the head, we include all those things like, we can include title, all those meta tags that we saw, they can go to the head. And then if we want to include some kind of CSS file or JavaScript file, we can include that on the head, but that's not absolutely necessary. JavaScript files can go right before the body ending tag of the body tag, if that's not absolutely necessary right at the beginning, right? On the head, we want to include the things that are absolutely necessary to render the page at the beginning. We don't want to load it with a lot of other files, because that's going to make our website or web application load for a long time, and it's very frustrating when you wait for the loading thing. So here we saw it can include things like title, it can include links to our CSS files, and the body can include a lot of elements. There are links, there are H1 tags. H1 tags are headers. We saw on our application on the top, it says CS76. That was an example of header. And then there are many other different versions of header. It can go all the way down H2, H3, H4, and such. And then we can include text, and HTML5 has a lot of new features such as video. I include the video on the handout sheets as well. And handout sheets also on the website. If you lose your handout sheets, you can go to our website and view that handout sheets from the last week. It has a video and a lot of new features. It has an article tag. There are a lot of cool and new features on HTML5 that we saw, and then we will continue seeing. So JavaScript, right? JavaScript, we're going to see on our first project. Our first project that we talked about was locale, that basically gives us an input box, and we input a zip code or a location, and then it pulls us the news for that location. So how do we achieve this functionality? We have a lot of HTML code, but we need some kind of logic things where we can apply if-else conditions. We can, get some objects, play with the objects and stuff. So JavaScript gives us that overall logical approach to the website. We can include a lot of logic in our website with the use of JavaScript. And then JavaScript, depending on the size and readability and making our code more readable and user-friendly, we can include our JavaScript in a file and then link it on our head or body tag of our application, or we can include the JavaScript directly on our code, right? Just like CSS. CSS can be included directly on the code, or with the user file, it can be included somewhere else. And these are all the functionalities that and there are many, many more. These are some main ones that we have seen in our programming classes, such as Java or C# that are available on JavaScript, right? We have break operation and constant, continue, do while, for in. It basically looks, for example, if we say like for m in this array, and it will go and fetch that array one by one. We have function, we have if-else conditions, return, and many, many others that we are already familiar with. So arrays and objects, also they exist in JavaScript, and objects are one of the main things we're going to see, because on our application, on our project, we're going to get Google News, right? And Google News is going to be given to us as an object. It's a JSON notation, JavaScript object notation. So we're going to get that as an object, and then it's our job to, kind of break that object down into the more fields, such as how many news do we have in that object, what are the titles of the certain news, what are the bodies of the certain news, what are the links. So we have to know the way of dealing with these objects. And then Ajax. Ajax is another very important feature of web application world. We gave a basic example of Ajax at the last lecture. What is Ajax? Ajax is a way of making a request to the server, getting a response back, and displaying on our website without having to reload the whole web page or web application, right? It's a way of adding dynamism to our web application. So if we break that down, what happens is, this is our web application where we have a user interface. We make a JavaScript call to the XML HTTP request. This is the object that's dealing with the Ajax. Now this object then makes an HTTP request to the server. Server looks at the data. If it needs to go to the database, pull up some data, create some data, make it in a ready state and give us back. So it pulls the data back and sends that data back to the same object via XML. And via XML, then that data comes back to our user interface and is displayed. So if you look at an example of Ajax, let's look at an example here. So there's two versions of Ajax we're gonna see. So first one is very basic. So what it does is it's an input box that takes stock symbol and then gives us the stock price for that. So if we want to look at the stock price for Google, we can just enter Google, and this is the representation of Google as a stock market. And we saw that as of today, the price for Google stock is $668.21. This is not really a good way of using Ajax, but I guess it gives us the basic application, basic view of how to use Ajax. As soon as we click the get code, it gave us this pop-up box and put the price in here, and it didn't refresh the page or nothing happened very dynamically. So let's look at the source code for this and understand what's happening on the background. So we just create a variable, right? XEHR, and then we set an object to that variable. We said that object that handles Ajax is XML HTTP request. So we create a new XML HTTP request, and we set that on our object XHR. Now this try catch block, we have also tried to catch blocks from Java or other programming classes, right? It's a way of defining because some of the browsers don't support Ajax. If we go to the older version of Internet Explorer or something, so we want to cache that, right? If something happens, we want to cache that and say and we know that Internet Explorer doesn't really do good on the older version, so we want to set and they handle it differently. So we want to update that. And after we have done with all the setting our XHR block, we want to check if it's null or not. If it's null, that means none of this actually worked. So basically, browser doesn't really support Ajax. So we want to alert the user that not supported by your browser. If it's not null, that means we have successfully set our variable. So we want to go and continue with the rest of our code. So we create a URL. And then a URL is basically saying go to the correct1.php file, and as a parameter to the symbol, pass in the document passing the information that's being entered in the symbol. And symbol, so get element by ID, goes to our HTML block, HTML code, and looks for the element that's ID symbol. And once it finds that symbol file, it picks the value from there. So if we go down there, so this is the part where we have ID symbol. If you realize this is symbol. So the value that's being entered here is being passed over here and set on URL. And after the URL, basically what we're doing is we are setting an already state change for this object, and we're setting that to the handler. Handler is a callback way of handling this. Once we got the response back from the server, how do we want to handle it? So after that, we basically open via get, and we pass in that URL that we already set it, and this true means do it synchronously. We can change this, making hold back for a certain amount of time, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, but true means do it, very asynchronously, and then we send in the no. So that's basically what happened on that example. But again, like we said, that example wasn't really the good way of handling Ajax. So what do we want to do? We want to look at the second example. All right. So here we are not dealing with any alert box. We have a symbol input, and that's empty, and price we say to be determined, right? And once the user inputs the stock symbol, for example GOOG, and then clicks on the get code, we want to display that price instead of that to be determined without having to refresh that whole page. So if we go in here and this thing and click on get code, we see that that's exactly what happened. We didn't refresh on the page, nothing happened, and dynamically it pulled in the price and updated just this part of our web application. So if you look at the code, It's basically almost the same. It again goes through that, try hash plug, sets up the URL, and goes and does all these things. But down here, this is where we have a price, we have a span, that's price, and this is by default is to be determined, and this is where it displays the price by the help of this function handler, right? This function handler is like getting that response and displaying on that spot. So that's an example of Ajax. All right, now we're going to move on to local storage. All right, on last we have half an hour more to go. On our last lecture, we saw that one of the new and cool features of HTML5 was local storage. It's a way of storing something on the user's device and then accessing that data anytime we want. That's better. Why? Because we are basically eliminating a trip to the server, and that makes our application user interface much smoother, faster. We don't have to make a server request every time, which can be tedious. It can take some while. So we can basically store some data on the user's device and then retrieve that data anytime we want. And then there's another example of this. How many of you guys have heard the term of cookie?
Yeah.
And that's not eatable cookie, right? Cookie is basically a way of storing the state of our application or website, and then every time we make a server request, it includes that cookie on our request, basically telling the server that this was the current state of our application. Depending on that cookie, server decides what to do next. For example, if you have a website that has some login functionality and we logged in once, it will be included in the cookie and be told to the server that this user is already logged in, so that we don't have to log in every time we touch the parts of the website that requires a login. That would be really tedious if that was necessary. So, and Google does a really nice way of. So last time we saw that Google, offers all this, with the use of Chrome, offers all these functionalities that we can use, and then network was one of them, right? So if we go to the page, let's say Yahoo. We saw that many requests have been made, page have been rendered, requests are still going on, and then this transfer file is still moving, and these are all the downloaded data from this page. So if you go to the so on the very first part, there's request headers. We saw this on the last lecture, and on this request header, there's a user agent. Basically, it's a way of our browser telling Yahoo service that this request is coming from this type of browser, right? If we would have made this request via cell phone, just a quick update of our last knowledge, it will tell again to the server that, okay, this request is coming from a mobile phone. So depending on this user agent, that's when servers decide what version of their website they want to display. That's exactly why when we go to the gmail.com on our desktop, we get this wide Gmail version, and then when we go to gmail.com on our mobile application, we get this nice and neat mobile phone version of our website. So that's with the use of this user agent and some others. So if we go down here, so we realize that there's nothing else in here. There's just the request headers and then response headers. Request headers is what we sent to the server, and response headers is what we got. So, but this was my first visit to yahoo.com, and yahoo.com already sets a cookie on my website telling what I have downloaded and all that stuff. So if I go and make another request by clicking to one of these pages, refresh this page. So I refresh this page, all these responses are being remade, and if I go to the yahoo.com, we can see that now we didn't have this at the first visit, but this was the second visit, and we have this huge file, something, code or something that says cookie. So this basically tells the Yahoo that, this guy has already made a request to you before, and this was the last state of this guy. So depending on this code here, Yahoo might decide, to render something else, or they want to display some other data. So this is what cookie is. And so it's a way of storing something on our local machine, and that's what local storage is as well. So if you look at the data one, it says null. So if you look at the source code, this is the way of using local storage. It's of course goes through the script tag, within the script tags. We have a function that's a score test, and then we basically alert the user by getting an item from local storage. But before getting an item from local storage, we have to set an item local storage, right? And we realized that that pop-up box, what did the pop-up box say? Null, right? Did everyone see null? That's because at this point, we didn't have this item set, because it reads from top down. Since we didn't have this item set, it displayed null. And then it went after, and then it set an item on local storage. And local storage items are only key value pairs. Key value pairs, you guys have seen example of that on Java. There are maps, right? On users of Python, there's they call dictionary, I think. So this thing is being used all over the programming classes. So it's a way of setting a map or dictionary or key value pairs. We basically give a name to the item and then value. And we know that on our Java or something, values can be many other things. A value can even be an object itself or something else. But on local storage, values can only be strings. Nothing else but strings. So we have to find a way to turn an item into string, store it on the local storage, and then retrieve the string and then turn it back into an object. And we will see later on that there's really cool this cool function that is called stringify. I even love the name, stringify. It takes an object and turns it into string, and then it can turn it back onto object. So at this point, after giving us that null, since we didn't have this full set, it will go and set the foo to test. So if we refresh the page again, we will not see null, we will see test. And that's exactly what happens. Because it already stored this information on our local storage. So how do we want to be sure? Let's actually go into the settings of our Chrome and clear our browsing data. If I clear everything, this is all my browsing data. I come back, I refresh, null. So this is an example of I went back to my browser and cleared all the browsing data, and then I also deleted that key value pair, right? And that's not already set anymore. That's why this thing was null. But then if I went back and refresh this page again, this is going to be test. So I have many other versions here. We can look at the data too. So data is null. It says nothing in storage for key var. So if you look at the source code here, what happens? Reading from top down. This is what is being called. It alerts the user that data is null, but if we refresh this page, it's not null anymore. It's been tested. It's been set to test. So I would suggest you guys to go and look at all these versions and see how they differ from one another. That's a really good way of understanding what's lying underneath. So, and then another cool function of HTML5 is geo. I'm going to keep that for next lecture. Geo is a way of defining our location, right? And every time we access our location, it will ask, the browser will ask us that, this web page or web application is trying to access your location. Do you want to allow it or deny it? And this is a privacy issue. This is not something we have to build on our application. It's by default built by browser. And then if we allow, it will pick our location of our of where we are, latitude, longitude, and accuracy, and then it will identify us. So we're gonna see this in in more detail next time. But now I want to go back and concentrate on our application, on our project. So our project was something that's called Locale. So Locale is something that, we have an input box and a submit button, and we wanna just input a zip code, and we wanna retrieve the information, news relating that zip code, right? And we wanna pick this data from Google. So let's just test one. I wanna get the news for Salem. 01970. So this is the zip code for Salem. So if I submit this, it goes and picks up the news related to Salem from Google News. So if I actually go and Boston, is that Boston? Boston.com. So if I go to the news.google.com/news/search, then I'll give a parameter to geo Salem. So this is a way of actually writing direct URL for Google News for retrieving news for a specific part. We will see that it gives us that Salem MA on top, and if you look at it, this is exactly the same news that we have on our website, right? This week is in Salem, November, blah blah blah, and then Boston.com. And then what happens if we click on one of these links? It takes us to that link where that news is lying. So how do we retrieve this thing? We saw Ajax, right? Ajax was a way of making a request. But there's another thing. In order to pull the news for Google from Google, we need to make an access not to our server, to Google's server, right? And there's this thing that is called same origin policy. It's not in the world of web. It's not really good to access to make direct requests to other servers. It's not actually allowed. So we have to find the hackish ways of doing it, or other ways. And there turns out that there's this thing that is called YQL or YQL, which is Yahoo Query Language. Yahoo Query Language can retrieve some data for us with putting some certain queries, and will give us an object. It can give us an object in terms of either XML file or JSON file. So that depends on what we want. So we can pick or choose, XML versus JSON, and then we can use that object on our website and get this really nice and neat functionality of making our own application of displaying news. So let's look at YQL. I'm just gonna Google this thing. So if you, actually let me just show it. If you Google YQL, I'm pretty sure you'll get it on the first place. It's developer.yahoo.com YQL. So if you visit that thing, it says try the console. So you follow try the console, and it gives us this interface. So what was the zip code for pulling the news for Salem? I mean, what was the URL? This was our URL, right? So let's just copy this URL. And turns out that Google offers a really nice, easy way of accessing this news with better readable files that are called RSS files, right? And if we go down here, like if we go all the way down to the Google page, we'll get this RSS file. An RSS file is basically in XML format that gives us really nice way of taking this Google News and implementing on our website. It gives us these tags that are linked, URL, image, title and such. So we take this, copy this URL, come back to equal, and here we put in a query. We say select star from RSS where URL equals to this. We can pick JSON and do test. So it picks up that file as a form of JSON and displays us here. And this is the link for that, for implementing this thing on our website. So if we take this link and put it on our JavaScript file on our web page, we get this whole thing on our website. That way we can access this news. So if you look at this file here, so we don't see anything on the page, but if we go and look at the thing, we can see. So this is a script, right? And we have a URL, and URL is set to the URL that we picked from Yahoo, right? We basically create a variable that is URL and take this URL from Yahoo directly and put it there, and set this URL variable to that. And after that, we can say that get JSON URL, which will get this URL, and we can say that, this is the callback function, do this with the use of this response. And console.log is a way of, displaying something on the console. This is for debugging or something. It's a very useful feature. If you want to debug some part of your code or something, you can use console.log function. So this response is basically the object, and that object holds all the data from Google. And query count will display us how many news are in that file. So let's go to the console. How can you reach to the console? You can just create on the right click on screen and go to the inspect element. It will bring us this user interface, or you can just go to the settings of the Google tools. Developer tools will also bring that up. So this thing down here is show console. So what happens when I enter 01970 here? So it creates all this. Links, and if you realize this creates an object, right? And this was the object that's holding our news. So if we actually go and look inside that object, what we'll see is this object holds query, and this query holds, it has a count that's 10, and then it has a bunch of things like diagnostics and stuff, and it has a thing that's called results. If we open results, we see that it has an item which is array of 10, and if we open that, it will give us, make this a little larger, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way till 10, and these are all the news that are associated with this object. Every news has description, link, publication date, and title. Exactly with the use of this thing, if you look at the source code of this page, we made this thing. We create a URL, and then we make a response, callback function, which is called the response, and then we, with the use of the response, we take the elements on that query and count them, and we know that there were 10, so we basically make a for loop that's gonna loop through 10 times and display a news header in forms of li tag. And how does it get the header? We know that we saw response, and it has query, and then it has results, and then it has item. This I is basically, with the use of this for loop, is going to be going from 0 to 10, and then pull up the link for every item, and also it will pull up the title, and it will display in a nice and neat way of this application. So I'm going to put this source code online. So this source code had a little bit of a bug in it. And what is the bug? We saw Ajax, right? We saw Ajax example of pulling up the, we put in GOOG, and then when we click on the get code, it pulled up the result for that Google price and displayed dynamically on certain place. So actually, let's go back to the example for a second. So this was what we saw, right? It pulls up the price. And let's try something else. Any other stock symbol that anyone would suggest?
Apple, AAPL.
APPL?
AAPL.
I thought it was APPL.
Let's try it.
Get quiet. All right. So that's the stock for Apple, 565. And we saw that it didn't really, it updated this part dynamically, right? So what is the bug in our code for that news? If I want to pull up some news for other place, other data, 02125, which is Boston, and click on get submit, it doesn't really update what we had before. It just pulls in and squeezes it right on the bottom, basically making it a little messy looker. So I would suggest, I'm going to put these codes online. Everything is on our website. And I would suggest you guys to take both the Ajax version of our code and then this version of our code and put them somewhere in it together, basically finding out the way of implementing this in a way that updates that part dynamically. So that when we change the zip code up and top and click on the submit button, it doesn't basically stacks them on top of one another, but updates that one place where we always get the news. So that I'm pretty sure that if you figure out to do that, and then you'll get hang of it. And if you have any questions, you can email me, or I'm all the time around. You can put me and we can look at it together. So I think that's gonna be it for today. Thank you guys for coming. I hope it was useful. So all the material is on the website. It's cs.salemstat.edu/ACM. You can go to the My ACM on top part. If you have an account, log in. If you don't have an account, you can basically sign up for login. And once you log in, you will realize that we have courses on top, and if you go to the courses tab, we have csMOB as a course. So if you go to the csMOB, every information is here. This was our week 0. Slides are here, source code is here, summary notes is here, and video from week 0 is here. And these are the files for week 1, which is today. So the video is gonna go in next week probably. Video is gonna go in here, so you can go. And I'm gonna put the example codes that we used for the project, so that you can take them and play around. All right, all set. Thank you guys.